I assume that at least some of you guys have been to a theme park. At a theme park, you have a selection of rides. Everything from the small kiddie rides to the giant roller coasters. Typically, you want to experience as much excitement as possible, so you get on that roller coaster. It's thrilling. The highs and lows are as unexpected as you can get. Sure, if you want a safer option, you can go on the carousel. There aren't many highs and lows, but you know what you're in for. In sports, you can get two kinds of seasons. First, you get the expected season, like the 2007 Red Sox, tied for the best record in the league, and they swept the Rockies in the World Series. Not too many highs and lows there. But then, you get the unexpected season, the real ride. Here you get the 2019 Washington Nationals. At one point, they were basically counted out of the playoff conversation, but then a mix of Baby Shark, starting pitching, and Howie Kendrick brought them a World Series championship. Lots of highs and lows, but the ride was all worth it in the end. Although sometimes, these rides won't have the endings you're looking for. All the loops, turns, highs, and lows don't matter if it wasn't worth it in the end. The story of the 2015 New York Mets was a wild ride. A ride that Mets fans likely don't want to relive. Well, unfortunately for them, we'll be heading on that ride today. Before we dive into the 2015 season, let's see how the Mets got to where they were. Between the years of 2000 and 2014, the Mets made the playoffs only twice. They made the World Series in 2000, where they lost in 5 games to their crosstown rivals, the Yankees. And then in 2006, they lost in the NLCS against that year's champions, the St. Louis Cardinals. Apart from those 2 seasons, the Mets found little success. However, it's not like they didn't have any star players. Stars like Johan Santana, Pedro Martinez, David Wright, Mike Piazza, and Jose Reyes were all All-Stars at some point during this period. In fact, in 2006, the Mets had a franchise record 6 All-Stars on their team. Over the next few seasons, the Mets either underperformed or were hindered by a multitude of injuries. In 2013, the Mets traded Cy Young winner R.A. Dickey to the Toronto Blue Jays for a package that included Noah Syndergaard and Travis d'Arnaud. During this season, Matt Harvey was a breakout star for the Mets, finishing 4th in the NL in Cy Young voting. However, at the end of the year, it was announced that he needed Tommy John surgery, a huge blow for the team. With Harvey out for the entirety of the 2014 season, the Mets signed Bartolo Colon and Curtis Granderson as a boost for the offensive side. However, by the end of the season, fans were talking about Juan Lagares, Lucas Duda, and Rookie of the Year winner Jacob deGrom. They were also talking about top 10 prospect Noah Syndergaard and top 50 prospect Steven Matz. With Harvey's return coming in 2015, along with the promise of these 3 pitchers, the future was looking very promising. Although, there were flaws among this group that would have to be addressed at some point. The whole team had question marks heading into the season. Could David Wright and Curtis Granderson have bounce back years? What would Matt Harvey look like coming off Tommy John surgery? Will the young pitchers make significant contributions? As a result of these questions, writers were indecisive on how they should view the Mets heading into 2015. In season previews, the Mets were mainly predicted to be in 2nd or 3rd place in the NL East. Only a few writers said that they would make the wild card. So, if opening day was the starting station for a roller coaster, the ride wouldn't look too menacing. However, there would still be that bit of uncertainty with you. What is this ride capable of? What is this team capable of? Opening day was an up and down ride in itself. Heading into the 6th inning, Max Scherzer, who was making his Nationals debut, had a no-hitter going. Well, confusion in the infield spoiled that possibility, and the next batter, Lucas Duda, hit a 2 RBI single to put the Mets in the lead with their first hit of the game. The Mets won that game 3-1. However, after this opening series against Washington, reliever Jenry Mejia was suspended for 80 games for the use of PEDs. The Mets went 2-3 to start the season, but then they went on an 11-game winning streak, sweeping the Phillies, Marlins, and Braves. Their 13-3 start tied their starting record in 1986, the last time they won the World Series. The ride was rising as high and as fast as it could go, but midway to the top, the ride experienced some mechanical issues. David Wright went down with an injury that ended up being spinal stenosis, which raised questions as to whether he could ever return to baseball. However, Wright's injury was far from the only blow to the Mets lineup. Catcher Travis d'Arnaud was hit by a pitch that led to a wrist injury, and reliever Jerry Blevins was hit by a line drive that broke his arm. In fact, these injuries actually happened in the same game. However, the month ended on a happy note. Matt Harvey came back from his 2013 injury earlier in the month, where he threw 6 scoreless innings in a win against the Nationals. Well, later in the month, Harvey threw 8 2/3 innings in a win against the Yankees, nearly pitching a complete game, something the Mets wouldn't do until September. While the ride has had a few bumps so far, it has mainly been an uphill track. The Mets were firmly in first place in the NL East. However, the higher you go, the larger the drop will end up being. Now we head to May. This month was a mixed bag. Preseason division favorites, the Washington Nationals, caught up to the Mets in the middle of the month, taking first place. However, have no fear because Thor is here. Noah Syndergaard made his debut in a winning effort against the Milwaukee Brewers. Actually, in a game against the Brewers, the Mets scored 14 runs in a blowout, including 10 in the 4th inning, where Wilmer Flores hit a grand slam. Speaking of Flores, he hit a walk-off single against the Phillies a week later, strengthening the team's record to 19-6, the best start in Citi Field history up to that point. Despite numerous successful moments, the Mets finished May with a 28-23 record, going 13-15 during the month. June was actually more of the same. On June 9th, the Mets were actually no-hit by Chris Heston. However, to bring in some optimism, the Mets were still in a tight battle for first place with the Nationals. And now to take away that optimism, towards the end of the month, the Mets hit a 7-game losing streak, and the Mets ended the month in second place, 3.5 games behind the Nationals. Although I can't say that there were no positives during this month. Jacob deGrom broke that losing streak with 8 shutout innings against the Brewers. In the next game against the Reds, Syndergaard had an impressive 8-inning performance of his own. Steven Matz also made his debut, where he actually set the Mets record for most RBIs in a debut game, and the MLB record for RBIs by a pitcher in their debut. Oh, and he also won the game. And Wilmer Flores hit another walk-off hit, which actually broke the Blue Jays' winning streak of 11 games. The Mets didn't end the month how they would have envisioned, but not all optimism was gone. But of course, July wasn't much better at first. The team dropped to 40-40. In fact, GM Sandy Alderson would not admit that there were any problems, characterizing the public as Panic City. The team would end at 47-42 heading into the All-Star break. The team remained in second place for the rest of the month. However, what matters to me, and what actually inspired me to make this video, was what happened in the final 3 days of the month. On July 29th, news came out during the game that Wilmer Flores and Zach Wheeler had been traded to the Brewers for Carlos Gomez. As a result of this news, the crowd gave Flores a standing ovation, which caused Flores to be visibly emotional. However, the trade had fallen through after the game. The next event happened the very next day, which I never hear anyone talk about. In a bizarre game against the Padres, the Mets were leading 7-1 in the 7th inning. However, Derek Norris hit a grand slam that cut the lead to 2 runs. In the top of the 9th inning, with the Padres down to their final out, heavy rain came down that forced a rain delay. After 44 minutes, the Padres got 2 hits. And then the go-ahead run, Justin Upton, who I'm sure you forgot was on the Padres at one point, stepped up to the plate. He hit a 3-run home run that put the Padres on top 8-7. Right after this at-bat, another rain delay ensued. This one lasted nearly 3 hours. With around 200 fans left after the delay, the Mets lost. The team had basically hit rock bottom. Well, the next day, Alderson finally made a significant move to improve the offense. They traded for top-tier slugger Yoenis Cespedes, and on that same night, Wilmer Flores hit a walk-off home run against the division-leading Nationals. The team was now only 2 games behind the division leaders. In August, the Mets solidified their place in the division. They started the month 6-0, sweeping the Nationals and Marlins. New acquisition Yoenis Cespedes started his tenure with a hot streak, specifically on August 21st when he hit 3 home runs against the Rockies. This game was part of a 7-game winning streak for the Mets. a streak that featured the return of David Wright, where he hit a second deck home run in his first at-bat. The Mets finished August firmly in first place as they had a 73-58 record, going 20-8 during the month. The first time they had a 20-win month since September of 2000, which was the year the Mets last went to the World Series. In September of 2015, the team continued their stronghold on top of the division. Early in the month, the Mets swept the Nationals to solidify their place, including a 7-run comeback on September 8th. On September 26th, the Mets clinched their first division title since 2006, and they ended the season with a 90-72 record. The Mets weren't exactly a team overflowing with superstars. In the National League, they finished 7th in runs scored and allowed the 5th least amount of runs. However, it felt like fate was on their side. No one predicted them to win the division. Barely anyone predicted that they would make the wild card, but here they are. The ride is heading towards the top.
Let's go! Batter up! We're taking the afternoon off. It's a beautiful day for a ball game today.
October. It's playoff time. I kind of forgot to mention that the Mets finished their season with a 1-5 record. In fact, they were no-hit by Max Scherzer. Revenge for opening day, I guess. The Mets actually threw 8 no-hit innings during the following game, but it would be broken up. Anyway, the Mets were against the Dodgers in the NLDS. On the backs of Daniel Murphy, Curtis Granderson, Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard, and Jerry's Familia, the Mets won in 5 games. One noteworthy performance was by Daniel Murphy in a tightly contested Game 5. He was the only player on the Mets with multiple hits and multiple RBIs in that game. Top-tier pitching by the 3 aforementioned pitchers also brought the Mets the win in Game 5. In the NLCS, the Mets swept the Cubs. Daniel Murphy continued his reign of terror by adding 4 home runs to his postseason total, setting a franchise record of 7 home runs in a postseason. The pitching also continued their dominance, and we can't forget the contributions from David Wright, Yoenis Cespedes, Lucas Duda, and Curtis Granderson. The Mets were finally in the World Series, their first in 15 years. But unfortunately for the Mets, the ride hadn't just reached the top, it had reached its tipping point.
It is Escobar, and he swings and hits it into left center. Back at the track, it is dropped. Cespedes couldn't make the catch. Gordon in the air to center. Back at the wall. This game is tied. Cut off by Wright. Out, throw home. Rule, tie game. The 1-2 again. Inside corner. The Royals, 2015 World Champions.
To say the Mets underperformed is an understatement. Not only did their offense shut down, notably their pitching did as well. The Royals were like the Mets, an underdog kind of story. Their offense just happened to be the one to show up when it counted. Although it wasn't just the Royals offense that beat the Mets. The Mets defense made some crucial errors during this series. Most notably the wide throw by Lucas Duda, which allowed Eric Hosmer to score in Game 5. However, there were many others, including miscommunication that allowed an inside-the-park home run in Game 1, a missed grounder by Daniel Murphy late in Game 4, and finally another error by Daniel Murphy in Game 5 that allowed the Royals to add on 4 more runs and win the World Series. Was the Mets' 2015 season a failure? Well, making the World Series isn't a failure by any means, especially when no one thought that you could get there. However, the journey is what defines the nature of the outcome. If the Mets were predestined to make the World Series, fans may not have been as heartbroken. All in all, the fans experienced a wild ride in 2015. They didn't ask to be a part of it, but that doesn't mean it was not enjoyable at some points. The end of the ride was one steep drop. In this case, that drop was not fun to experience. So, what ride would you prefer? One filled with unpredictable twists, turns, and drops? Or a steady, slow-paced cruise? Both of them would have the same outcomes, so it's really up to you on what you'd prefer to experience. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe if you want to stick around. Thanks for watching.